Hello and welcome to Good Way for Grown-Ups. I'm your host, Holly, and I'm so glad that you're here. This is the podcast where we ask why the good way matters and how we can best walk in it. Hello, friends. Today I am here to check in on Shakespeare. So we started the season with Twelfth Night and The Tempest, which are comedies because they are plays that have happy endings. In the next few episodes, however, I'm going to introduce a few tragedies. So those are the plays that have famously sad endings. While some of the content may be a bit much for younger listeners, I wanted to include them for those friends who are ready for them. I would imagine probably the last time most of us read Romeo and Juliet was for freshman English class in high school. Perhaps you put yourself in the shoes of Romeo or Juliet, and it felt a bit frivolous and silly to fall in love one evening at a masquerade and then get married the next day, right? But a visit back to the story through the lens of experience and a bit more wisdom reveals a truly heartbreaking story. The story is a lot less about two young lovers and more about the consequences of hatred. Their love is only forbidden because of the feud that dominated their families for years. In the closing scene, we see the Lords Montague and Capulet reconcile over the dead bodies of their beloved children. It's too late, and the only response they have is to outdo the other in charity. This is the image that Shakespeare leaves us with, and it's what the play is all about. When we allow hatred to take root in our lives, it pervades and destroys those things that are most precious to us. Now listen, we don't need to lay out that whole story for our kids right now. We just want them to become familiar with the story. If they understand the plot, it will be easier to follow the story when they pick up the original text in a few years. If they understand the characters and how they're related, they'll spend less time trying to figure out which team Mercutio is on, and more time thinking about his words and his actions defending his best friend Romeo. If they already know that Juliet loves Romeo, it's not going to be a big spoiler. Then they'll be able to understand why the line, "Romeo, oh Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" It isn't about his physical location. Rather, she's asking why he has to be Romeo, why he has to be the mortal enemy of her family. When they read Romeo's soliloquy, it is the east and Juliet is the sun. They'll understand how deeply he's been affected by love, that she is now the center of his universe. Everything else now revolves around her. The themes of this story will come alive, and that's really what we're after. Now, I imagine some of you out there might say, that's great, but can't all this blood and despair wait until they're older? And perhaps that's the right call for your child. You know that best. But I would argue that they're probably more ready for it than perhaps we think. I think kids already know that the world is broken. And if they don't, they will really soon. And I think the sooner we can give them a framework to engage with the brokenness, the better. One of the things I think about when I create episodes for the podcast is how these stories foster the development of moral imagination. Here's what I mean. We teach our children morals, but more often than not, it's not enough by itself. I know it wasn't for me. There needs to be some sort of a connection between these rules and their feelings and affections. That is, what they care about, what they love. Stories can help us learn how we ought to feel, how we ought to respond to things that are beautiful, and how we ought to feel in response to sin and evil. In reading good stories, children can be awakened to seeing themselves in the story and imagining what ought to be done. It's a safe place to learn, where the consequences aren't real, but the lessons are. We can talk about courage and define it, but we can make a much stronger impression about what courage is by reading a book like The Tale of Despereaux, where this pathetic little mouse risks everything to be in the presence of beauty. Or, keeping with our mouse theme, like Narnia stories, where Reepicheep models courage and fortitude, loyalty to his friends, and sails off into the sunset, having lived his life well. We can talk about sacrifice and define it, but when we read a story like Where the Red Fern Grows, It's no longer this abstract idea. It's real. And the tears streaming down our faces are real, even though we've never stepped foot in the Ozarks. We can talk about friendship, how to be a good friend. But when we meet Anne and Diana in Anne of Green Gables, that vision comes to life. I could go on for hours, so I'll stop, but I hope you see what I'm getting at here. Stories have the power to awaken us, not only to know what is moral, but to feel the right things in response. My hope is that my listening friends out there will walk away from Romeo and Juliet feeling heartbroken. Not because I'm mean, but because I actually care very deeply for them. I want them to feel sad about the things they ought to feel sad about. Romeo and Juliet is a very sad story. And so hopefully we don't repeat those same kind of mistakes in our own lives. This idea of moral imagination is unpacked really beautifully in a book called Tending the Heart of Virtue by Vigen Guroian. I have a few other articles and some great quotes from Lewis and Chesterton. I'll drop all of that in the Substack letter this week, so you can look for that. If you don't know, Substack is where I send out updates a couple times a month about the show and reflections. It's kind of like this. It's free. You can sign up through the link on goodwaypodcast.com. Lastly, before you go, I want to extend an invitation to you to collaborate with me and Jeff. We create these episodes with quite a bit of thoughtfulness about how the work of our hands and our voices can help to shape children to know and love God and the world He created. We spend hours planning and recording, as well as a fair amount of money to produce and publish content and resources so that it's all available to you. Your partnership would mean a lot to us, and it will also allow us to keep episodes running without ads. So here are a few ways that you can support us. You can rate and share the pod wherever you listen. You can visit goodwaypodcast.com. On there, you can find resources that you can purchase. They're not expensive, but every little bit helps us, and I think they're good resources that you can use at home. There are Amazon affiliate links, particularly for all the cool Shakespeare stuff that's out there. So by purchasing it through that link, we get a little bit of a kickback, and that helps us. And then finally, there's a new little thing on there called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can just send us $5 or whatever. And that helps us to offset all of our costs and keep this work going. So if you'd consider that, we'd be most grateful. Other than that, we'll be back soon. We have Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet coming up soon, and then we'll lighten it up and throw in a Midsummer Night's Dream after that. So stay tuned. Lots more Shakespeare still coming. I've also had a few requests to pick Winnie the Pooh back up. So if that's something that is interesting to you, I'd love to hear from you. You can hop on Instagram and send a message. You can also go to goodwaypodcast.com. There's a place to send me a message there. You can also respond to a Substack. There are lots of ways to get in touch, and we always love to hear from you. So I just want to encourage you to keep looking for the good way and walking in it. We'll see you next time.